Long gone are the days of waiting to be seen in a doctor's office only to have that awkward conversation with your healthcare provider. WISP gives you access to sexual and reproductive healthcare from the comfort of your home. Get treatment for BV, yeast infections, UTIs, and much more delivered directly to your home or ready for pickup at your local pharmacy in less than 3 hours. The best part? WISP is discreet, convenient, and you don't need medical insurance to receive care or prescription medication. Visit us today at hellowisp.com.
If ADHD is highly inheritable, then let's treat it like, hey, buddy, you and we've got monkey brains. So let's figure out how to work together. You know what? I have kind of the same thing going on here. Or you could say, you know what? My brain works slightly differently. Can you tell me more about that? And so instead of working against your child, you're joining arms going, you're not alone. Let's work together. Let's problem solve together.
I'm Debbie Reber, and welcome to Tilt Parenting, a podcast featuring interviews and conversations aimed at inspiring, informing, and supporting parents raising differently wired kids. Would you define your family as an ADHD family? Today's guest, Dr. Tamara Rosier, and the author of the book, You, Me, and Our ADHD Family, Practical Steps to Cultivate Healthy Relationships, says that ADHD is not an individual experience. It's a relational one. And ADHD dynamics affect the entire family system. I know many listeners of the show would identify as being in an ADHD family. And so I'm so excited to share this conversation and Tamara's work with you. Tamara is an ADHD coach, a speaker, an educator, and founder of the ADHD Center of West Michigan, where she and her team support individuals and families in better understanding how ADHD shapes their experiences. In addition to the book we're talking about today, she is also the author of the popular book, Your Brain's Not Broken: Strategies for Navigating Your Emotions and Life with ADHD. In this conversation today, Tamara shared her personal and professional insights on what it really means to live in an ADHD family, from the emotional roller coasters to the quirky dynamics that might feel very familiar to you. We talked about how ADHD deeply affects relationships, communication, and emotional regulation across the whole family system. And Tamara offered creative, relatable metaphors, I love a good metaphor, that help make sense of ADHD behaviors. And she emphasized the importance of self-awareness and revisiting our own childhoods so we can parent with more clarity and empathy. There are lots of takeaways and ideas in this episode. So here you go, my conversation with Tamara Rosier. Hey, Tamara, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. I'm really looking forward to getting into your work. You are such a strong voice out there in the ADHD space and supporting families and ADHD adults. And your new book came across my radar, and I just thought I had to bring you onto the show. The book we're talking about today came out last fall. It's called You, Me, and Our ADHD Family: Practical Steps to Cultivate Healthy Relationships. I would love if you could talk to us a little bit about your personal why in this space and how you got into being this leader in the ADHD conversation.
Yeah, well, You, Me, and Our ADHD Family is my second book. And my first book is Your Brain's Not Broken. I had been an ADHD coach for a little bit. I wrote the first book, Your Brain's Not Broken, to all those people who are just so tired and frustrated. They didn't know they had ADHD, and they're just like sludging through life. And I just wanted to give them hope. Your brain's not broken. You're okay. And sure, having ADHD, yeah, that's a handful. It's not great. I'm just going to be really honest. I'm not one of the people who says, it's my superpower. I think you have to be very privileged to be able to say those words. But for the rest of us mere mortals, it does cause us to walk with a limp. But I wanted people to know it's okay. You can have hope. So I wrote that book, and then I started working a lot with families. And I'm realizing that families are limping along because we don't do ADHD in isolation. There's a whole environment there. So I wrote the second book, trying to give hope to families. And so You, Me, and Our ADHD Family isn't a parenting book. It's people who happen to have family and are affected by ADHD. How do you live in a healthy way yourself and have healthy relationships? That's how I position the book. I care deeply about the clients I'll never meet. And so I write to them.
That's great. Well, thank you for that. And so much in your book too, even though it is focused on ADHD specifically, I think just for listeners, as we set the tone for this conversation, there's a lot in there that's applicable to just neuro spicy families, navigating all the different dynamics that might be going on. But would you take a few minutes to describe or define perhaps an ADHD family? Because you talk about how it affects entire families and not just individuals. Say more about that.
Well, first of all, whenever there's one ADHD person, look for more because ADHD is highly inheritable. I work with parents. They're like, yeah, we don't know where this ADHD came up. We're doing fine in life. But if I probe a little bit, I can see and hear that the parents actually had different life circumstances. For whatever reasons, they were able to manage differently than their son or daughter, but they do have ADHD. In my case, I can trace my ADHD back at least to my great-grandfather, but I can kind of see the thought. And I had two grandfathers with ADHD, and I had two parents with ADHD. And think of the drunken goat rodeo that can be. So here's why when you have ADHD in the family, it's so hard. First of all, those of us with ADHD, we have challenges managing our emotions. And the reason why, I know this isn't news to you, but the reason why we have difficulty challenging emotions is because our brains work differently. So when I take in information, I first take in information not through my prefrontal cortex. I tend to take it in a different place and then go, well, what does this mean? Emotionally, what is this saying about me? And so I'm processing information emotionally first. Now I can think logically, but I'm going to process it emotionally. So this means that, let's say we were in the same house together and you're like, Tamara, we take out the trash. And I might go, oh, for crying out loud, I was going to do it until you asked. And now I'm just tired of you asking. I have this emotional response. And I write about this in the book. I manage my ADHD really well during the day with my clients. I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of nailing life. And I come home, hang up my coat, and my husband says something, and it might slip out of my mouth like, well, that's a really dumb idea, right? Because I've been a grown-up all day, and I forgot to use my grown-up skills. And I'm just responding in my ADHD fashion of, yeah, that's stupid. Now, he also has ADHD. And so now we have two emotional responses, okay? So another problem in neurospicy families is a short-term memory issue. And short-term memory issues, I was just explaining this to a new client today. I have difficulty thinking 3 minutes ahead. I didn't understand neurotypical people can think 3 hours ahead, if not further. I still think it's a source of like witchcraft or something. Like, how can you think this far ahead? It used to mystify me. And finally, I just realized it's because of my short-term memory limitations. So those of us with ADHD, we truly do have short-term memory limitations. But guess what? Those people in my family who don't have ADHD, they find it exhausting. Let me give you a quick example. And my daughter was very gracious about this, but my daughter's living with us for her first year in grad school. And I was with a client in my office. She was in her bedroom/office. And I realized, oh no, I forgot my cord downstairs. I'm with a client, the battery's saying, hey, you're going to die soon unless you plug me in. So I just text her saying, hey, can you bring up my battery pack? And so she runs downstairs. And, I imagine her thinking, what are you going to do when I move out? Like, why are you always leaning on me? Now, she's an incredibly wonderful, gracious person. And when I say things like that, she's like, no, I don't really think that. But that's just because she's super nice, right? What if you're not living with someone who's super nice? They're like, for crying out loud, will you please stop doing this? And it's because I did not anticipate my battery dying. Now, for those of you who are neurotypical, you're like, well, that's an easy thing to anticipate. Sure, but not if you can see 3 minutes. So for me, it's like driving in fog, right? I don't have a clear view. And I'm saying this because that's very irritating to live with if you're neurotypical. You're like, why couldn't you predict that? And the research shows we really can't predict it. Research is kind of depressing on this one. That's something that also makes it difficult. Some of us with ADHD are legitimately time blind, meaning I have a PhD, I could do statistics, but me trying to figure out what time to leave the house, that's another kind of witchcraft area where I'm like, do I need cast a spell? How do people know this? Right? I literally don't feel the passing of time. Well, that's hard to live with if you don't have ADHD, or it's hard to live with when you do have ADHD, right? So let's say we're all ADHD. We're all showing up at church really late, hoping everyone's shoes are on, right?
Yeah, and raising kids who may or may not be ADHD or neurodivergent in some way, you can just imagine how challenging it could be to get through just your typical day, getting out the door to go to school, all of those things. And I actually want to go back a little bit. You said that you can trace it back to your great-great-grandfather.
Yeah.
So that's pretty amazing. And we know that this does run in families. There's also so many listeners who've discovered their ADHD as an adult because of who their kids are, and they're really starting to like connect all the dots. I'm sure that you work with a lot of those clients. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of parents doing their own work? Maybe it's reparenting themselves in order to be able to break cycles or really show up for their kids in a way that would be more affirming and supportive?
Oh, I love this question. Thank you for asking this, because I work with parents a lot. They get so angry at their kids. And I said, why are you so angry? Yesterday, I had this conversation. Why are you so angry? Well, I see this, and this is going to lead to this behavior and this and this and this. And I said, do you have those behaviors? And the dad started crying. And he's like, I do. And I don't want my son to have these behaviors. I see the worst in my son. And all of a sudden, his anger melted away. And we were talking about fear. By the way, this tends to follow gender lines. So moms tend to have more fear about their daughters, raising ADHD daughters. Dads tend to have more fear around raising their sons. A lot of dads have said to me, I have no idea how he's going to turn out to be a man. Like, I have no idea how I'm going to make this lump who won't leave the basement into a man, right? And so there's a lot of fear there. And so when I work with parents, I really want them to be honest. You're afraid, especially if this is your first kid. I talk about the first pancake. Like, if you ever make pancakes, you don't know how the first one's going to turn out. Is it too hot? Is it too cold? Do I have enough butter in there? Like, you don't know how your first pancake's going to turn out. And so we just have to admit we're afraid. We don't know how this is going to turn out. So we first want to really work through, be honest with the fear. And when we're honest with the fear, then that melts away our anger and frustration. And then I really say, let's partner with a kid. If ADHD is highly inheritable, then let's treat it like, hey, buddy, you and we've got monkey brains. So let's figure out how to work together. You know what? I have kind of the same thing going on here. Or you could say, you know what? My brain works slightly differently. Can you tell me more about that? And so instead of working against your child, you're joining arms going, you're not alone. Let's work together. Let's problem solve together. Now, it doesn't mean tiptoeing around your child's triggers. I do not condone that ever. It means helping the child problem solve and be a fellow problem solver.
Yeah, I'd love to spend a little more time talking about the parent experience, but let's take a quick break and then we'll dive back in. Last year, as we were navigating a big international move, vacation was off the table. So this year, I'm pretty much counting down the days until Ash is back from a first year at college and we can do a proper family vacation. Let's just say I have a lot of tabs open on my computer. I'm thinking warm weather, itinerary with a peaceful vibe, great nature, and fantastic food. Even though I haven't nailed down our itinerary, I have treated myself to a few new things from Quince, the direct-to-consumer clothing and home brand that offers everyday luxe pieces at fair prices. Right now, they've got lightweight European linen styles from $30, washable silk tops, and comfy lounge sets. I picked up an organic cotton gauze tiered maxi dress, in black of course, that I predict I'll pretty much be living in during our vacation. A few other things I love about Quince: they only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices, and they use premium fabrics and finishes in every piece. Even better is that Quince prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands because they partner directly with top factories, cutting out the middleman and passing the savings on to you. For your next trip, treat yourself to the luxe upgrades you deserve from Quince. Go to quince.com/tilt for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/tilt to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/tilt. I'm noticing that just about everyone I know is feeling totally fried. Nervous systems are shot, and there's this general sense of overall fatigue and overwhelm. And I feel it too. It's really hard to muster up the energy to show up for ourselves and our families when the world feels so heavy and unpredictable. While we can't change everything going on around us, we can take small, meaningful steps to care for our nervous systems and cultivate calm in the midst of it all. And one of my favorite resources for doing that is Calm. Calm is the #1 app for sleep and meditation, giving you the power to calm your mind and change your life. I often recommend Calm as a resource in my Tilt community because it is a simple and powerful way to proactively tend to mental and emotional well-being. Whether you're looking for meditations to ease anxiety, improve focus, or build healthy habits, or you just need some soothing music, sleep stories, or guided relaxation exercises, Calm is like having a little support system right in your pocket. Just a few minutes a day can make a real difference, and Calm makes it really easy to find what you need whenever you need it. Stress less, sleep more, and live better with Calm. For listeners of our show, Calm is offering an exclusive 40% off a Calm premium subscription at calm.com/tilt. Go to calm.com/tilt for 40% off unlimited access to Calm's entire library. That's calm.com/tilt.
Hilton brings you new ways to stay, with experiences that let you capture the glory days. Introducing the Graduate Hotels. Each inspired by local college towns, these stays are always original and never boring. Get in touch with traditions all across the country and enjoy a stay that's a class above the rest. Book at Graduate Hotels with Hilton Honors Points at Hilton.com. It's a win-win. Hilton, for the stay.
Just before we move into some of the other content that you share in the book, can you spend a moment talking about any work you think it's important for parents to do as well in terms of maybe revisiting the childhood that they had and maybe how their ADHD symptoms and the way they showed up may not have been met with understanding? Maybe they grew up feeling like they were a massive screw up, the bad kid, all those things. And of course, we want to show up differently for our kids. What do you recommend parents do?
Before the break, we talked about, hey, admit that you're afraid. Admit that you've never done this before, that you're afraid. Admit that it really ticks you off to see what you believe are your worst characteristics in your progeny. That's just something special that just really irks you. Just admit those things. But then the next step is go back. What is it that you're really hating about yourself? I don't call it reparenting. I want people to go back and like, where's the shame? A lot of times people think parent coaching is about fixing their kid. It's really about exposing the shame in the parent. Now, remember, shame is just insidious. Okay. Shame's like, well, my parents never asked me, so I'm not asking my kid. My parents just sent me off to college, especially like Gen Xers love saying that kind of stuff, right? No one did this for me. And I say, well, what if they would have? How would that have felt? Would that have been good for you? What can you do differently to see yourself differently? I'm going to get real vulnerable and then regret it later. Okay. So I see myself as a screw up. And people don't understand how hard I am on myself. Well, if you think about my story, I am a Gen Xer. So it's before ADHD was prevalent in girls, right? Even though it was there. I had 2 ADHD parents who fought, who were emotionally unwell, right? Because they didn't have ADHD managed. And I grew up in chaos. They eventually divorced. And so I just had this chaos. And I grew to believe that it was all up to me. If I was going to do anything, it was all up to me. But that means all the pressure, I had no one to work with. It was only me. I had to unlearn that belief as an adult. And so when I coach parents, I ask them, what belief do we need to unravel? Now, people can't answer that question because you can't go, hey, I believe that everything's on my shoulders. I had to do work to get there. But through coaching, I had to unravel that belief. So a lot of times when people say reparenting themselves, they're really talking about finding those hidden false beliefs about yourself. And how do we grow out of it? You can change beliefs. I'm in the business of changing beliefs, right? So anytime I want to go back to, wow, Tamara's a screw up. I'm like, no, let's trace this back. I'm a screw up because I thought it was all on me. And so I take responsibility for everything, right? There's a point in my life, you could convince me the problems in the Middle East were my fault. And I'm positive there's a parent out there with a similar experience. What? Yeah, that checks out. Not about me causing Middle Eastern problems, but about them being blamed for everything. Right? Do you see how I built this all up? So I had to learn to parent myself differently, and I treat myself very differently. The other thing I want parents to do is I want them to go back and high five their younger selves. And I do this a lot with my clients. I'm like, all right, so let's imagine, and I'll use myself as an example, 10-year-old Tamara. She's a tomboy. She's throwing dolls up in the trees so that she could go rescue them. I want to be a paramedic or a stunt woman because, duh. What would you say to 10-year-old Tamara? And I'd say, you know what? We turned out okay, kiddo. We turned out okay. We did it. It was a hard journey, but we did it. And then it flashed forward. I usually find out when the hardest time was in a person's life. For me, it was 12. I had to make some very grown-up decisions I wasn't old enough to make. What would you tell your 12-year-old self? Well, you know what I tell her? I'm walking with you. It's okay. You're not alone anymore. And you see, we go back through and talk to ourselves at different times. Parents can experience deep healing that way.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, first of all, for sharing and being vulnerable in that way. I think that to me is where the most powerful transformations can happen when we're willing to do that work. And I think that is how we really do break those cycles and be part of the bigger paradigm shift, right? And I just wanted to see if I can connect the dots here, because you talking about going back and having a conversation with that younger part of you, that's something I do that my therapist has been working with me in doing through the internal family systems modality. And as you were just explaining that, I'm thinking about internal family systems. And then that also came up for me as I was reading your chapter on monkeys, which I love. And I would like you to talk a little bit about it, but just this idea that there are lots of different aspects to who we are. So with that really awkward segue, could you tell us about monkeys and the work that you do?
That wasn't awkward at all because I'm a huge fan of IFS. Now, I'm a coach. I don't do therapy, but you can apply the theory differently, right? So the monkey chapter is called Monkey Malarkey. And something I was noticing, I started this first with my younger clients. And I was noticing my clients would talk about my ADHD. And it was just this big bunch of we don't know what. And parents would go, your ADHD. I'm like, well, that's not fair because we don't know what to work on. And so I took the symptoms and gave each symptom a monkey and then named that monkey. And so I started to work with kiddos and I had a big basket of monkeys with name tags. And so when we pull it out of the basket. I'm like, oh, here's disorganized Derek. Do you think disorganized Derek lives in your head? And we have to only choose 5 of the monkeys that show up the most. And, we talk about, well, no, I'm not that disorganized. Meanwhile, mom's like, but where's your homework? Oh, is that disorganization? Oh, yeah, I have disorganized. It's helping the client understand, yeah, I have that monkey. So we go through them. Others are like emotional Emma, avoiding Andrew, time blind Timmy. Whoops, there's mine. Critical Kelvin. Critical Kelvin's a little jerk. He pops up on my shoulder a lot to talk to me. So we break it down and we talk about them. And then I say to the kiddos, hey, here's a rule. These are your monkeys, man. You can't shoot them. You can't poison them. One kid said, maybe I can poison them. I'm like, nope, we're not going to poison them. They're yours to care for. So how are we going to care for it? Because all these monkeys in their weird way, and there's like anxious Amy, right? She'll pop up and go, oh no, right? All these monkeys in a way think they're trying to help you. So we go through and ask, how do you think the monkeys are helping you? Well, disorganized Derek, he thinks he's saving me time. He's like, we don't need to do that. Let's just shove it in the bottom of our backpack, right? Avoiding Andy, like, he's like, hey, listen, there's a lot better things we can be doing right now. And so the monkeys think they're helping. Let's thank them for helping. But because you're not the monkey, let's redirect that. So let's help them. And by the way, we would line up the monkeys with their name tags and take a picture so that parents can be inquisitive. Like, hey, which monkey do you think is talking right now? Right? One day I was working with this wonderful priest and he said, what's that basket of monkeys for? And I brought out the monkeys and I lined them up and I went through the exercise with him. He loved the exercise. And he's like, well, this makes more sense to me than just trying to manage my ADHD, because what is that? And so he would work on, of course, he's ADHD. He's like, I found 50 more monkeys. I'm like, okay, cool. They are not legion. We are not trying to cast them out. We can only work with a few at a time. And so we worked on monkey management with him. And after that, I thought, hey, I wonder if adults would get anything out of this. And then I started using it with adults. And it meant a lot to adults. It's my way of helping people manage their ADHD to kind of focus on one symptom at a time and not focus on all of them all the time. And to hear the voice, right? And the other last little bit about the monkeys is the monkeys talk to each other and they gang up on you. An example of my life is, I think I even wrote about this in the second book. After my first book came out, I regretted being vulnerable, right? I'm like, Tamara, too much has been said. And anxious Amy pops up like, we agree. And this is too scary. Maybe you could call the publisher and have her just like not sell the book. I mean, this is when they were already printed, delivered to stores. And anxious Amy wasn't real, but she's really like trying to help me any way she can. And I'm like, that doesn't work. That doesn't work. And I'm like, oh, and I took a breath. I'm like, anxious Amy, I know you're trying to help me, but I don't think there's a way out of this. And she's like, there's gotta be. So out pops my little friend, Critical Kelvin. He's just like, tisk, tisk, tisk. You have done a bad thing here. I hope you learn from this. I hope you learn. Stop being vulnerable. And I'm like, I know, Kelvin. Overwhelmed Oscar shows up and he's like, yeah, mistakes have been made. Let's just go take a nap. Like, you hear all the voices. And so then something we do with clients is help them to manage the voices.
I love that. Thanks for those examples. And I think it is so powerful to externalize that in a non-judgmental way. And again, recognizing that you're trying to help. I get it. So you're not like banishing, because you can't banish the monkeys. So I think having that kind of uneasy alliance with them or relationship with them is part of the deal. Let's take another break. And then I'm going to just touch upon a few other things that I wanted to make sure we share with listeners today.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Spring is here, and you can now get almost anything you need for your sunny days delivered with Uber Eats. What do we mean by almost? Well, you can't get a well-groomed lawn delivered, but you can get a chicken parmesan delivered. A cabana? That's a no. But a banana? That's a yes. A nice tan? Sorry, nope. But a box fan? Happily yes. A A day of sunshine? No. A box of fine wines? Yes. Uber Eats can definitely get you that. Get almost anything delivered with Uber Eats. Order now. Alcohol in select markets. Product availability may vary by region. See app for details.
There were two things that I wanted to just make sure that we mentioned because I think they play a big role in the family dynamic of an ADHD family. And maybe in talking about them, we could share a strategy or two or a reframe that parents can think about. The two things are in their huge buckets. You don't have to go into detail with them, but you mentioned earlier emotional dysregulation. And I just want to say that that is something I think that same with executive function challenges, like people forget about that when really it's the biggest thing, right? I think it's the biggest thing. You also talk about rejection sensitive dysphoria, which is something our family absolutely deals with and we've talked a lot about on the show. But the way you wrote about that in the context of a family dynamic was really interesting to me, something I hadn't considered. I've always thought about it from outsiders' perception or that kind of thing. Maybe pick one of those and talk about the challenges that that presents in a family and how do we begin to navigate it in a way so it can feel better?
So before I start, this is the disclaimer. I was a former English teacher. So no one can beat metaphors to death like a former English teacher. I know we just did a monkey metaphor, but now I'm going to give you a different metaphor.
Perfect.
Let's say we have a child. The child freaks out in the middle of Michael's, right? True story that happened. And the parent's like, oh my goodness, how did we get here? And it's just everyone's overwhelmed. Well, instead of interacting at that moment, we have to interact at different moments. And so that's why the pool metaphor is helpful. So if you imagine the pool is full of your biggest emotions. And they could be big happy emotions or big angry emotions, big sad emotions, whatever. They're the biggest of the big. And they swim in the pool. Okay, they don't swim in the pool. It is the pool. Okay. What we don't know when we have ADHD all the time is the proximity we have to the pool. And so unlike people who are neurotypical, we can accidentally fall into the pool. Neurotypical people tend to have a fence around the pool. They tend to even have a lifeguard on duty. Like, I don't know how much they pay that guy, but I would. But I don't have a lifeguard on duty. And so there's sometimes I accidentally fall into my own pool. And I'm like, how did this even happen? Right? And so what we want to do is work on proximity, understanding proximity to the pool. Now, when I work with families, we either use Legos, we use Barbies, we use whatever toys they have. They bring it. I talk with the parents ahead of time, and we talk about the proximity to the pool. So what happens is we don't want the child to fall into the pool, but when the child is in the pool, and by the way, parents, you fall into the pool too, right? Sometimes the child's in the pool, we're like, cannonball, we just jump in right in there too. That's not great. We'll deal with that later. But we don't want to deal with it when child's in the pool. When the child is in the pool, that child is not able to reason or respond accordingly. So your goal is, if your child is in the pool, to get them to a safe place where they won't harm themselves or other people, right? And then afterwards, we can talk with them. So if they do land in the pool, that's not the time to reason. All reasoning is gone, right? And we know that they're emotionally flooded. So I help families and kids understand when they're getting close to the pool. I help kids, and I work with a lot of genius parents who just kind of pick up what we've done and run with it, who help their kids have ways of getting out of their pool. Right? Once you're in the pool, you're responsible to get yourself out of the pool. One genius mom made it was a basket full of like life preservers. And the daughter could choose one of the life preservers to look at and go, I want to crawl under the piano right now. That's what I'm going to do. And she would crawl under the piano and she would come out when she's out of the pool. We talk with kids ahead of time. How can you get yourself out of the pool? And we create things that they can do and reminders because they're going to forget. So after they get out of the pool, that's when the pool stories come in. That's when we talk about, let's go over the pool story. So what happened? How did you get in the pool? Was there a way to avoid the pool? Did you have to fall in? No shame. Just what were your options? How did you get yourself out of the pool? Did that work for you? Notice I'm only asking questions. I'm not lecturing. Parents love to lecture and tell their kids what they should be thinking. I can tell you 100% of the time, it never works. At least not the way you think it works, right? Only ask questions. Now, some parents are like, well, he still deserves a punishment. I like to frame it as, all right, so this all happened. You splashed a lot of people and dragged people in the pool. So how do we make this right? So instead of me giving the punishment, I'm saying, how are you going to make this right? Because you did things. Now, some parents still want to punish. And I say, go ahead and punish them. The ADHD brain's not going to learn from that, but it might make you feel better. So that's fine.
Thank you for walking us through that metaphor. I loved it so much. I've written quite a bit about my own personal challenges of not jumping into the metaphorical pool when my child is emotionally dysregulated. And that's something I worked so hard on. So I just love the way you kind of played this out. I love all the little tools that you can use for getting the life rafts or to get out of the pool. I think that's so powerful. So this whole metaphor is totally working for me. And one of the things that you said that kids have to be responsible for getting themselves out of the pool. And I think it was in your common emotional missteps chapter. You say that parents sometimes inadvertently encourage their child's emotional errors. Is that what you're talking about here?
Sort of. So sometimes very loving parents, they're doing all of this out of love. But when we don't allow other people to take responsibility for what they're feeling, we're really doing them a disservice. And that's for everyone in the whole family, right? I used to take responsibility for how my husband felt. That worked for him. It didn't work for me. It took me years to figure that out, right? And that wasn't his fault. That was mine. So we need to be careful to let people own their emotions and behaviors. Something we want to teach our kids is we name emotions. One child I worked with, it's like if a butterfly lands on your hand and you're like, oh, you're a butterfly. What do you want to tell me before you fly off? Again, beating up metaphors since 1968. So that's a way to do this. So, imagine the emotion butterfly landing on your hand. You're like, oh, hi. Oh, I'm sad. Butterfly, what do you want to tell me before you fly away? So we're not going to hold on to the butterfly. We're not going to try to keep it in a cage. We're not going to feed it. We're just going to let it flutter away because that's what butterflies could do. And that's how emotions can be very transient, right? And that's why we want to encourage our kids. We name it, but then we can also release it. Sometimes the butterfly sits on your hand for a while. Doesn't mean it's bad. It just means sometimes it's there.
Yeah, that's great. I did want to just touch upon the quirks. You shared the 10 quirks you most commonly see in families that you work with ADHD. I was recognizing so many of these, and one of them being starting a conversation without context. That's just how we roll. Could you share one of those quirks that's maybe the most common that you see and how you recommend families reconcile or be with that quirk?
Oh, goodness. I didn't even know I was going to write that chapter. I have one daughter who's neurotypical. She's taught me so much because I'm like, oh, is that how people think who don't have ADHD? Intriguing. I was writing at the dining room table and she was doing some work at the dining room table too. And my husband came over and I'm starting to talk to him about an issue. He looks at me and he starts to talk to me and then shuts his mouth and just turns and walks away. And I look at my daughter, I'm like, well, that was weird. What's happening there? And she looked at me and this shocked me. She goes, Mom, both of you guys do that. I'm like, no. I'm an ADHD professional. I'm sure that I'm more aware of myself than this. And she's like, you did it yesterday. Holy cow. And she's saying this in a generous way, not criticizing me, but it was shocking. So I didn't realize this, but in the past, I would be kind of low-key irritated. Okay, I have ADHD. My husband's irritated me, but he has ADHD. So instead of being irritated, and instead of nursing that thought, I said, hey, we were talking earlier about this and you walked away. Can you tell me what that's about? And he had to think for a while. I'm like, you were standing here. I was standing here. I'm reconstructing it all. And he's like, oh, the pool filter was on and I had to go turn it off before I forgot. That was such an eye-opening experience to me because I could have made that about me. And so when we have these quirks, and we have quirks, a great rule is this isn't about me. His quirk is not about me. He wasn't saying, I reject you, Tamara, and I reject everything you stand for. And even though we've been married for a long time, nothing's about me. He forgot the pool filter and just walked away. I'm still shocked that I do it, though. I'm not going to lie.
You are a professional after all.
Yeah, I am a professional. Just one last quick thing. I have a psychologist friend who is an ADHD expert. And she read my new book. She's like, Tamara, I didn't realize I should be asking my husband questions about what he's interested in. Her husband was standing right next to her. And he looked and goes, is that why you were asking me about football? And she goes, yes, I'm just trying to be interested in you. Because another quirk is we just sit and talk about ourselves. We're quirky. We're real quirky.
Interesting, fascinating, and all those things as well. So I'm going to mention the name of the book again because I found it a really enjoyable read with lots of metaphors, lots of anecdotes, like just felt very relatable. So if you are listening to this and you consider yourself an ADHD family, you will absolutely get a lot out of this book. It's called You, Me, and Our ADHD Family, Practical Steps to Cultivate Healthy Relationships. And Tamara, is there anywhere in particular that you want people to connect with you?
My author's website is tamararosier.com. The center that I founded is miadhd.com. M as in Michael, I as in England.
Awesome. Okay. And listeners, as always, I will have links to those resources and everything else we talked about, as well as Tamara's book in the show notes page. So definitely check that out. Share this episode if you got a lot out of it with other ADHD family friends. And Tamara, thank you so much. This was such a pleasure to connect.
I love your questions. You are so thoughtful. So thank you for having me.
You've been listening to the Tilt Parenting Podcast. To learn more about today's guest and the resources we talked about, check out the extensive show notes page on Tilt Parenting. There you'll find key takeaways, links to all the resources mentioned, and even a full transcript of our conversation. Just go to tiltparenting.com/podcast and select this episode. If you're looking for personal support from me and connection with a phenomenal community of parents raising neurodivergent kids, join us in the recently rebooted Differently Wired Club. The new Differently Wired Club can help you cultivate the positive shifts you're hoping for. Go to tiltparenting.com/club to learn more. The Tilt Parenting Podcast is hosted by me, Debbie Reber, author of Differently Wired and the founder of Tilt Parenting, and was edited by Andrea Curtis Amasquita. To support this show, please join my Patreon campaign where you can set up a small monthly contribution. Just go to patreon.com/tiltparenting to learn more. If you want to follow Tilt on social media, you can find us at @TiltParenting on Instagram and Facebook. And lastly, please take a minute to leave a 5-star rating or review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. That helps this show stay visible so others can find it more easily. And that's all for this week. Stay safe, stay well, and take good care. And for more information about any of the parenting resources Tilt offers, visit tiltparenting.com.